Hello everyone. The agenda for today's meeting, our today's lecture is situation ethics and virtue ethics. What we have been doing so far has been looking at the various domains of ethics. We have looked at consequentialism and non-consequentialism, which is also known as teleological ethics and deontological ethics respectively. Within deontological ethics, we looked at W. D. Ross theory of ethical rules or prima facie duties as an example of deontological ethics. Now, we will look at two other kinds of ethical systems or ethical proponents. One is situation ethics, which looks at situations as the name implies, and a more dominant third category of ethical theories apart from consequential and non-consequentialism is virtue ethics. It also talks about, there is also virtue epistemology, there is virtue as another kind of theorizing which is based on character rather than on actions. We will come to that after we go through a small section on situation ethics. Now, the reason why we have situation ethics is to contrast ethical thinking, which is neither deontological nor consequential, but another frame of thinking, that how we come about to it. Now, situation ethics talks about love as being the way. It was pioneered by Joseph Fletcher in the Western tradition, and if I may suggest that you can think of it as in the Indian tradition as the bhakti marg, the marg where prema or sneha is what determines right and wrong, that it is love out of which things have the moral domain emerges. We have seen that neither rules, laws, nor rigid theories can form the basis of the ethical domain. It is only love and acts emerging from the spirit of love that lay the foundation of ethics, right. So, many of you would already be skeptical or even cynical that, well, what do we do when we actually take a moral decision? Do we actually go through so many theories? Do we think about so many things? Probably not. We are just functioning out of our intuition. To this, I have two responses. One is, one can take decisions out of intuition, one can take decisions without thinking too much out of it. Nevertheless, it may be stemmed from a deep theory that has or a deep understanding or a cosmology that you yourself have not articulated to your own self. Let me slow down and repeat. You may be a consequentialist without knowing that you are a consequentialist, without articulating it in words that you are a consequentialist, because the intuitive decision making that we take comes from somewhere. Generally, it comes from something called cosmology. Cosmology is something like a pre-theoretical worldview that we have, which comes from our society, family, culture that we are a part of, and from that we pick up our cosmology. That means cosmology not in the sense of astronomy, but cosmology in the human world. So, that means it gives us a system of philosophy of taking decisions. So, one might be a consequentialist. Say, if you are of the religious kind, you would prone to be more deontological. You would see something. Let us say, let me split the question of food, vegetarianism versus non-vegetarianism. Now, you could be a vegetarian out of habit, you could be a vegetarian out of choice. When you are a vegetarian out of choice, you could be a vegetarian because you love animals, you could be a vegetarian because you think that it is wrong, that your religion has prohibited you from eating animals. So, if you are, you can yourself look at your way of looking at the world and understand that what kind of theory that you hold. So, this is the first reason, that we can take decisions without articulating or without consciously knowing what kind of deep theory that we hold. We hold it for sure, it may come from our cosmology, because that is how we take decisions, right. Otherwise, it would be just pure random. The second is, when you encounter theories, then you can think better. You can think better whether you would like to be this way or whether you would like to be some other way. So, when you think through these, then you come out to be a better sought after thoughtful person. But given these 2 points, the further addition that I would like to make here is that you are also not just looking at a level of an individual, your own decisions, those are important and you are making them and seeing how theory plays a role there. When you take decisions at a collective level, maybe as a committee, maybe as friends, maybe as a company, maybe as a founding entrepreneurs, maybe as political participants, maybe as political leaders, whenever we take decisions and argue with each other or to arrive at a conclusion, I specifically emphasize to argue with each other and not quarrel with each other, because arguing is when we reason with each other to come out with the best reason. We are not doggedly stuck to our point of view. So, as philosophers, as young philosophers, as philosophers who have gone through these ideas, I hope that you are able to distinguish between arguments and quarrels and do not abandon arguments for as quarrels, and rather see the power of arguments, because knowledge advances through arguments. So, arguments colloquially are have a bad connotation, they seem to be like fights and quarrels, but arguments are not quarrels, and that is something I hope you come through to in this particular course as one of its side effects. So, coming back now to situation ethics. Now, here Fletcher talks about love, and love is understood as agape or agape, as it is called, as it may be called if I remember correctly, or selfless love. Selfless love is not the notion of romantic love, but love where one is selfless about something. This is a term generally coined in the Christian tradition, but can be applicable to many traditions. We have talked, there are many traditions, and as I suggested, you can think of it or analogically as the Bhakti Marg in the Indian tradition, where it talks about love. So, I am sure there are equivalents in various religions where love powers decisions. Now, ethical theories are rigid and often present counterintuitive output. Laws are clearly blind to the situation. 1 and 2. Ethical theories are rigid and often present counterintuitive output. So, if we are as a deontologist, I have a set of rules that I think are inviolable, intrinsically valuable, and I apply them to a particular circumstance, it is going to be very rigid and sometimes will also present very counterintuitive output. So, let us say I think that one should always or thou shalt not lie, and then I find that I stick to this principle, but I see that my sticking to this principle sometimes hurts other people. So, that makes me now think that whether I am being my duties of beneficence is conflicting with my duties of telling the truth. So, there seems to be a clash of rules there, and I am sure you can think of many other examples. This is an example that just occurred to me. The second is laws are clearly blind to the situation. That means, laws are very often termed in formal context, right. If we look at the example of students who are late to the class will not be marked present. That is a law that is blind to the situation. Why the student is late, whether the class started early or late, these all are something that the law does not take into account. Perhaps a vital component of ethical domain is neutralized out by ethical theories. What is that vital component of ethical domain that is neutralized by ethical theories? That is the uniqueness of the situation and the perspective of the agent. Again, here two crucial points. What is it that the ethical theories miss out? They miss out two things: the uniqueness of the agent and the perspectives. So, agent, something about the agent they miss out. They miss out the uniqueness. That means, every individual being is unique and therefore will have a different way of thinking, and the perspective of the agent. These are two things. The uniqueness causes the perspective of the agent. If I may put it in philosophical terms, in a little bit of jargon, the uniqueness of the agent is metaphysical, the perspective is epistemological. That is how we come to know it, but you need not worry about it if it does not, if it sounds complicated. Now, these two parameters, which are these two parameters here 1 and 2, let me call them P 1 and P 2. P 1 and P 2 along with the spirit of love lay the situation ethics view of the ethical domain. So, here what is situation ethics? Situation ethics talks about situation, yes. So, the uniqueness of the situation and I think I have made a slight confusion here, but here the what they talk about is uniqueness of situation, not the uniqueness of the agent. So, you can just ignore the past few seconds of the conversation, that the uniqueness of the situation, and here is the perspective of the agent. So, yes, it still holds that if it were looking at the uniqueness of agent and perspective as epistemological and metaphysical, that holds, but here what particularly the distinction is the uniqueness of the situation and the perspective of the agent. Together with this, with the spirit of love, lays the foundation of situation ethics view of the ethical domain. It is not laws that are applied, but the spirit in which a value decision is made is that matter. So, not the laws, but the spirit. What is the spirit that is being used? When confronted with a value dilemma, the agent assesses the situations, its particularities, this is crucial, and a resolution is arrived which seems to be the most compassionate or out of love. So, when an ethical, how does a situation ethicist make a decision? A situation ethicist makes a decision, well, is confronted with a value dilemma. The agent assesses the situation. What does he do by meaning of assessing the situation? He takes the uniqueness of the situation into account. She or he takes the uniqueness of the situation into account. Its particularities, that means there is something particular about a situation, and a resolution is arrived at which is the most compassionate or out of love. Let us say the role of a judge in a court of law is also a testimony to situation ethics, because the judge, there are the law books, but the judge takes into account the situation of the alleged crime to see both its feasibility and, more importantly, in the situation ethics component, to determine what is the amount of punishment to be or what is the amount of sentence to be given for this particular violation of the law, if the violation has been established, right. So, to adjust, to calibrate the amount of punishment to an established violation of the law is a role of the situation ethicist by the judge. Let us take a little bit of an example to make sense of this. Two people have stolen, say stolen 1,000 rupees or 10,000 rupees from an ATM, right, from two independent ATMs. Now, one has stolen for is a first time who stolen, one who stolen for some dire need at home, the other one is a habitual offender and is getting his livelihood out of that. Now, both these acts are the same, right, they are acts of stealing on even the same amount, the same method, the same source, yet they are different in their situations. One is a first time offender, one is a repeat offender. One has stolen to meet some dire need at home, whereas the other has stolen as a matter of income and as a matter of habit. So, this is when the same act, like using the theories of situation ethics, the judge varies the sentence to each of these two cases. So, this is a typical example of situation ethics in action. Now, we come to the domain of virtue ethics. Let us start with a sorry, there is just one more page to situation ethics. A clarity that we want to talk about is that, are situation ethicists relativists? Well, clearly the answer is no. It might appear to be so, but it is no, because it might appear that each agent is entitled to arrive at his or her own decision, thereby there being no absolute decision, and it is all perspectival. This is the allegation made here. Right? It might appear that each agent is entitled to virtue at his or her own decision, thereby not virtue, I read it wrong. It might appear that each agent is entitled to arrive at his or her own decision, thereby there being no absolute decision, it is all perspectival. This is incorrect. This is the retort. According to situation ethicists, love is the single guiding principle, and if not intentionally made ambiguous in application, there would be no variation in decisions in identical situation. So, the catch is that very often when love is taken as motivation for action, it can be intentionally made ambiguous, and that is what causes the difference. So, in genuine application of love or agape as a spirit of application, there will be no distinctions, or there will be very little distinctions in decision making. Here is a quote from Fletcher, that love relativizes the absolute, it does not absolutize the relative. How does it relativize the absolute? By incorporating the situation. And that is why it is called situation ethics. So, with this we come to the end of situation ethics, and now I can start with virtue ethics, which I am quite excited to share with you, because this is another way of looking at ethics altogether. This is an ethical domain that starts from the time of Aristotle. A lot of Indian moral thinking also can be classified as virtue ethics, and it starts with a very fundamental question: what is the right thing to do versus what sort of a person should I be? What is the right thing to do versus what sort of a person should I be? Let me start with a few examples that I have thought of, and that will help you understand, or that will help you figure out what virtue ethics is talking about. Let us look at video games, online games, video games, virtual world. Now, if we have two people, say P1 and P2, if P1 continuously plays violent video games and enjoys the process of causing death, destruction and violence, whereas P2 is playing video games, but does not enjoy these things, or does not get into gory or these kinds of games. And as we know that a lot of games have a lot of gore packed into it, and a blood and a lot of violence packed into it. So, somebody who is enjoying violence, P1, and someone who does not enjoy violence, P2, both of them playing video game, maybe the same game, but is there a difference between the two? One enjoys, one does not enjoy, that is the difference, of course, but on the moral component, is there a difference between the two? Both of them are not causing any violence or destruction in the real world out there, right? Both of them turn off their consoles and they are done with the day, and then they go back to leading their lives. So, whether one has enjoyed violence, been sick about it, or in a sick fashion, whereas the other person who has not who has played it as a game and not enjoyed the gore and the violence in it, they both have not caused a difference in the world out there. Yet, can we make a moral assessment of the two, compare them with each other on the basis of their acts? Think over it. Let me put a further example. Pornography. Pornography has often been termed as a victimless crime, right? That when pornography is where people are role playing intimate sessions, sexual sessions, yet it is a role playing that is happening. It is not something that is happening in real. So, in that sense, someone is being exploited or pretends to play along to being exploited, whereas the other is exploiting and or is pretending to exploit. Nevertheless, this is a victimless crime because there is not a real act of crime happening. It's a pretense act. It's a play. It's a pretend. It's a session of acting. Yet, when somebody takes joy in such acts, can we assess them morally? Is there something wrong with it? Is there something right with it? Now, let me present a third example. Let us imagine two patients who are lying in coma in beds, in two hospital beds in the same room beside each other, and the same healthcare provider comes to clean and nourish these people. Imagine these people are in coma, so they have a in that sense they have a they are paralyzed. Let me be more quadriplegics, that they cannot communicate, but they have a active conscious life. They are not able to move their limbs, but they have an active conscious thinking life, yet they are not able to move their bodies at all. So, they are able to see, have opinions, have judgments, but not able to express the same. Now, these two let us call them paralyzed patients are being treated by a caregiver who has to clean them and give them their medicines, and one of them is very grateful to the caregiver, is not able to express it, but is very grateful because they are the caregiver is taking care of this person. The other is quite angry, bitter and vengeful, that well, why did this happen to me? I just hope that this caregiver goes and trips on these tubes, falls down and lands up in a bed beside me, so that that caregiver is also unwell and experiences the kind of suffering and trauma that I am having. Now, notice both the patients are not making a difference in the world out there, but they have a difference in their characters. They have a difference in the way what they wish for the world, what they wish for the caregiver in this instance. Would we be able to make a difference between these two? Now, in all these three cases, if your answer has been yes, there is a moral difference between the two agents, maybe in the case of the video games, in the case of pornography, in the case of the two paralyzed patients, then you are accepting virtue or ethics or virtue as a component of moral decision making. So, here they talk about character or motive more important or at least equally important than rules, principles and consequences of an action. The key word here is character and motive. We move from act based to agent based. The difference between an act and an agent. Take some time. I think this should be thought provoking when you try to look at this distinction between the act and the agent. How are they different? The act is what takes place. The agent is the person from which the act flows. So, what should be what should be the basis for making a moral judgment? It should be the act or the agent or both, or in what combination. A malicious person may still have it within his power to perform actions that do not reflect that malice, but that malice exists. How would you assess this? When we look at malice, malice is something which is which has not found expression in the world, because it has not been able to cause any harm, but the very fact that one wishes ill to a person and another person who wishes well to another person, if both of them who are ineffective in the world out there, but yet have a feeling of their own, can they be judged on that kind of motivation or intention that they hold? Virtue ethics would answer yes. There is a clear distinction between these kinds, because our motivation and character is crucial to our moral thinking. The question to ask is, what sort of a person ought we to be, rather than how to decide on which act is to be chosen. virtue ethicists claim the former is more basic than the later. So, what sort of a person should I be rather than what should I do? This is a crucial. So, what sort of a person should I be to what act should I do? We as moral agents do not need a theory to give us the right course of action or a subset of principles formulae to arrive at the right action. What we need is to know about what kind of a person we ought to be, and the answer to this question will also determine the actions we do, the choices we make. Character of the agent is prior to the actions of the agent. That is crucial. Character of the agent is prior to the actions of the agent. Actions flow from the character, thus character is the cornerstone of moral theorizing. So, this sums up what very basically what virtue ethics is talking about. Virtue ethics is talking about character, about intentions, about a whole domain of moral, of human character that may not be adequately represented by looking at the moral domain only in terms of consequences or acts. The virtue ethics, virtue ethicist brings a narrative to the moral discourse. What does it mean? Like the judge we talked about in the last session, that a judge in the court of law is trying to look at the character of the person to temper the judgment. It looks at the situation. So, in that sense is also valuing the character of the two allegedly two charged people who have charged for the same crime and it's been established, right. So, they are looking at the character of the two people and thereby making a difference between the two. So, here perhaps an important domain of ethics lies in looking at virtue, character and values as an addition, if not of more importance, to just consequences and law, intrinsically valuable laws, because virtue ethics is putting the human being back at the center of the moral world, right, because character is essentially being human. Laws, consequences are abstractions, are events in the world out there. So, with this I hope we have had a brief introduction of what different kinds of ethical theories can be. We have looked at consequential theories, non-consequential theories and virtue ethics. We have also looked at an example of deontological ethics as ethical rules by Ross, prima facie duties, of consequentialism as an example of consequentialism as utilitarianism, and of course, then virtue ethics as an evolving independent way of thinking about laws, which has been evolving not in the sense that it is new, but it has been around from the times of Aristotle, and Aristotle in the Western tradition has been the been associated with virtue ethics, and in the Indian tradition a lot of moral thinking has been virtue centric. So, what kind of a person should one be? I hope these questions and these videos have stimulated you to think about these issues, and we invite you to read and read about it, think about it and formulate your own opinions on this. With this we come to an end of the fourth module, which talks about ethical theories, and in the next module we will talk about moral thinking in the Indian tradition and some applied ethics cases. Thank you.